The next question was about how do you chunk information into smaller parts. The next question was about using a call and response strategy. And this question was about using visuals. And 100% of teachers use visuals in all subjects. So that was the strongest area. The weakest area on this slide was using a hook for lessons. These questions asked about using talking routines, using graphic organizers, using music, and using gestures or visual cues. You can see that music and gestures and visual cues could use some growth in reading and writing. This asked about building on background knowledge. Again, 100% of teachers are using that in 100% of subjects, really strong area. Using language objectives, using sentence frames, and explicitly teaching vocabulary. The area of improvement on this slide was using language objectives. Lastly, do you teach metacognitive strategies? And do you use input through listening, input through reading, output through talking, and output through writing? Whoops. And 100% of teachers are using all those types of languages. So the survey about current practices, it did reveal that teachers are using best practices balanced across all subjects, and that is a really big strength. There was a couple areas of growth. In the subject area of math, teachers could be using a hook, graphic organizers, sentence frames, and vocabulary more, but at least half of the teachers reported that they are currently using those strategies. And then in reading and writing, teachers could be using music and gestures or visual cues more often. Just across the board, not all teachers reported that they're using language objectives in any subject, and only 4 teachers are using language objectives in the area of reading. So teachers could work on more intentionally incorporating language objectives. The next part of the survey analyzed how often teachers are using best practices. So yes, they're using them, but how much of the time you use them throughout the day. So you could choose between 19% or less, between 20 and 39%, between 40 and 59%, between 60 and 79%, or between 80 and 100%. So for strengths, I'm really looking for green or purple on the graph, and then orange, red, and blue show that it could be an area of improvement. So the same instructional practices were examined as this part of the survey. So how often do you use a hook? Looks like this one could use some improvement. How often do you chunk information? About half of the teachers are using that frequently. How often do you use a call and response strategy for lessons? About 3/4 of teachers are using that pretty often. How often do you use visuals for lessons? 100% of teachers are using them 100% of the time. So that's a strength again. How often do you use talking routines for lessons? Looks very strong. How often do you use graphic organizers for lessons? Also, most teachers are using it about 60% of the time. These two show areas of improvement again for how often do you use music and how often do you use gestures or visual cues. Building on background knowledge for lessons is a strength, as well as using sentence frames. How often do you use language objectives? Again, most teachers are using those less than half the time. And then how often do you explicitly teach for lessons? More than half are below 60% of the time. How often do you teach metacognitive strategies? Most teachers are teaching them about half the time, so that could be an area of improvement. And using input and output in the different ways. Most teachers, well, about half are using it. Over half are using it most of the time, but it could improve. So upon analyzing this data, there was strengths. Most teachers are using several best practice strategies more than 80% of the time, including visuals, talking routines, sentence frames, background knowledge, graphic organizers, and creating a collectivist culture. But an area of improvement is that only 2 teachers use a hook more than 60% of the time.